we're getting to the local portion today. Now of today's show, Political Pain. We are going to talk a little local news. Now, if y'all were here last week or the week before, we talked about the San Luis Obispo police officer who was killed in duty. And two were shot. One died. And his name was Luca Benedetti. And they did it they were shot while serving a search warrant on a man named Eddie Gueron, who was suspected to be a burglar or to have burglarized a business that he used to work at, a gym in San Luis Obispo. And they did a knock warrant, and he basically met them with gunfire. They returned fire. He was hit, not fatally, and then he turned the gun on himself. And according to the sheriff, they had no contact with him before, I believe, or any mental health scares. I'm going to get to or mental health reports about him. I'm going to get a bit more to that. But it created quite a wave in the community, and as I've talked about before, it's a conservative area, so a lot of folks were showing solidarity with the police officer and his family, which I think is warranted, of course. And but there were also people who were brought up that Eddie Gueron, the shooter, that he was suffering from a severe mental health crisis, and that it was a terrible thing that happened, but that should be taken into account as well. And that is a big thing that police reform advocates talk about, is better services, social safety net. But I mean, the SLOPD also, I've done reporting on this channel. You can go back and on my website as well, politicalpain.com, about the San Luis Obispo Police Department being dishonest about the actions of Black Lives Matter activists, misrepresenting information, and then, once footage is released later, becomes clear that they were dishonest about, throwing the book at Tiana Arata and her friends, recommending felony charges for protesters for, blocking the freeway, which is a long-standing act of civil disobedience. And so the other part to this, the third part to this, as I get to it, there's a website, a news website in San Luis Obispo called Cal Coast News, California Coast News, right? And I'm not going to mince words. It's hot trash. It's very bad. And I can tell you many reasons why. But one of it is it's a very reactionary, right wing website. They often, it's mostly spearheaded by one person, but they wear the moniker of investigative journalism, when really it's a lot of slanted right-wing nonsense. And here's a really good example of that. This is a story on Cal Coast News posted on the 21st, so a week ago. This is by Karen Veely. Karen Veely is the person I was talking about. Let me just kind of make it a little bigger. Cal Poly professor warns students to be wary of police officers. Okay, who thinks that's true? Cal Poly is the college, California Polytechnic, San Luis Obispo. I'm going to go there in the fall. Kind of cool. So here's her story. I mean, keep in mind the story is this long. It's that long. It's got to be at or less than 500 words. When several thousand police gathered on the Cal Poly campus to honor a murdered San Luis Obispo police officer and university alum, that's Detective Luca Benedetti, Cal Poly students got a warning to be careful. The widely shared on social media notice from either ethnic studies chair Janelle Navarro or her husband, Professor Jose Navarro, a member of the department faculty, told students that officers would be in slow. It's not clear who authored the email. Neither responded to emailed questions about the notice. So she reached out to them about it. Quote, this is from the Post. I have learned that there will be anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 police officers on campus in attendance of this service. The warning to students says it is likely they will be downtown or in other spaces and slow throughout the day. Okay. The couple has been outspoken. So she interjects here. She say editorializes. The couple has been outspoken on racial justice issues and published, quote, this is the title, Braided Together, Native and Black Hip Hop Against Police Violence. In Thinking About Hip Hop, Blackness, Indigeneity, and Identity, published by Do It Yourself Press in 2019. DIO describes itself as a, quote, socially conscious, peer-reviewed publishing company. They're publishing in journals? These college professors? Here's the rest of the post, of the email, which she calls a warning. Quote, I am letting you know so you can take proper precautions for your well-being and safety. The warning adds. The warning, which BLM leader Tiana Arata shared in an Instagram story, was quickly criticized as inflammatory on social media and by SLO resident David Sparkman. Okay. So she literally is just reading comments to a post, guys. Quote, why on earth would you send out such a horribly bigoted and inflammatory, not to mention inaccurate email? Sparkman said in an email to Dr. Janelle Navarro. Are you intentionally trying to trigger unrest on campus and in our local community? Or is your email simply an exercise to inculcate young minds into fearing and hating law enforcement? Either way, your reckless actions are reprehensible, Sparkman added. You require serious discipline. Cal Poly declined to comment about the post other than to say the university supports free speech and recognizes the death of an alum. Quote, as a state institution, Cal Poly supports the right of all its campus community members and visitors to express their individual opinions regardless of their positions. Matt Lazier, Cal Poly Media Relations Director, said Cal Poly was honored to support a service to recognize and memorialize an individual and Cal Poly alum who lost his life while serving in San Luis Obispo. Guys, so this is clearly like... This story is clearly just a bait, like just a bait and switch. Like, oh my gosh, can you believe these two college professors who literally publish on race and police violence, like let their students know that there would be thousands of police officers like on campus because, you know, that might actually have an effect on students of color who, you know, like maybe Tiana Rada, the girl who posted it, who was, you know, thrown to the ground and tackled by the San Luis Obispo Police Department, you know, and people of color, what they have to deal with police and police departments across the country. And as I said, specifically, the SLOPD was dishonest about the actions of Black Lives Matter activists. And, you know, Tiana Rada and her friends have been mired in court and legal struggles all of last year and into this year because of, you know, frankly, in some cases, false depictions of them and their actions by the police department. It's, you know, I have sympathy for the killed police officer Luca Benedetti, his family, and even, yeah, sure, folks in law enforcement. You know, I think it's terrible when they're killed in the line of duty. But this kind of thing, like to not recognize that law enforcement, their presence has an effect on people who've been victimized by them, people of color, poor people, whoever. I mean, you're just not recognizing the facts of the institution. You're just not. And if you need any more proof that, I mean, so Karen Veely is really just a shameless, shameful journalist. And you don't have to look very far to figure this out. I mean, you can Google her name and find out a little bit about her. She's a convicted libeler. She's a libelous journalist. She made national news. This is the New York Times. California Today, a journalism scandal roils the Central Coast. This was in 2017. Karen Veely and Dan Blackburn, writers and co-founders at the online publication CalCoast News, were told to pay $1.1 million in damages. In a nutshell, a 2020 article by CalCoast relied on unnamed sources to accuse a contractor of mishandling hazardous waste. It also said the owner, Charles Tenberg, was once fired from a county job. None of it was true, according to Mr. Tenberg, who demanded a retraction and, failing to get it, sued. So this is Karen Veely. She is a libeler. She's libelous. So she's a liar. And so, you know, like she's literally made national news, lost the lawsuit. Guys, like I'm I've been a journalist my entire adult life. You have to work real damn hard to prove libel in court. And you have to be especially incompetent to get convicted of libel, right? They have to prove that you knowingly knew the truth and did not print it, right? Or failed to clarify it. And as this article kind of mentions, Veely has enablers. Yet Calcos has fans. Among them is Dave Congleton, who hosts a local radio show that he's used to promote the publication's work, including articles that spotlight accusations of misdeeds against a police chief, a city manager, and a sanitation official. Warts and all, Mr. Congleton said in an email, Karen Veely remains the only game in town when it comes to investigative reporting. That's absolute nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Reached by the phone, Miss Veely suggests larger forces were at work. There's always larger forces in her legal troubles. I do believe this was done to shut down Calcos News because we've been very effective in bringing things out to the public that no one else reports on, she said. Calcos has been very good at riling up and roiling up right-wingers on the Central Coast, defaming people, and in this case, literally proven libeling people. So while she's clutching her pearls over this simple email, Jeremiah is mentioning that the comments on the website are wild. Let's see. If we go back to the Calcos news story, here and we look at the comments, you get an idea. Maybe our illustrious university should include basket weaving 101. I'm sure there is some cultural lessons as well as ethnic lessons. This college, if you deem to call it that, should be closed and the divisive professors fired. Talk about racism and pure hate. I would not send my dog there, nor do I give any business to SLO anymore. Sad. Yeah. I mean, ethnic studies sounds like a hobby, not a profession. Ethnic studies, I wonder if they study the Irish, Italians, and Germans. I'm guessing not. And I love it. Oso's kid. They actually do. It's a fairly important part of the field. Whiteness is a social construct, which there's always the guy who shows up to battle it out with him. You're doing the Lord's work, Oso's kid. I ain't got the patience. Whiteness is a social construct, which is shown in evidence by the fact that those of us who may now be considered white, for myself in my Irish roots, but this was not always the case. Only a few generations ago, my ancestors did not enjoy the benefits of white society that I experience in full. Just 50 years ago, Italians were seen as the other. Even the Germans, who now make up the most common family lineage in the U.S., were once non-white outsiders, seen then as little more than barbarian Hessians. Wow. Ethnic studies, in part, is the study of power and how it is doled out in America. It is both relevant and important to understanding America for how it is. Of course, you're not much interested in America as it is, are you? You just wish to be coddled by childish myths and outlandish fairy tale origin stories. Otherwise, you'd actually have to think. Dude, that's awesome. Oso's kid bringing the woke, bringing the base takes. Throwing down on Calco's comments. Here's the guy. I could do the MAGA Teddy voice for that. Your use of the term whiteness is terribly racist. Your drive to vilify Caucasians of all nationalities is horribly objectionable. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, he did. He got a downvote of 49, a negative 49 rating. Holy crap. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is pretty crazy. I mean, it just keeps going. Look at this. That's nuts. Common sense guy. Race baiting 101 is what the class really is. Oh. But back in reality, there the San Luis Obispo sheriff had previously said that the local authorities had no warning that Eddie Gueron, the shooter of this police officer, Luca Benedetti, was mentally unstable. And thanks to real reporting by real journalists, I give a lot of credit to Matt Fountain. He's joined in this byline by Nick Wilson. SLO police were warned about Eddie Gueron's mental illness in months before deadly shooting. It's released on the 26th. Family and friends of the man who killed Detective Luca Benedetti in a shootout say they repeatedly warned San Luis Obispo police about his spiraling mental illness and that he owned firearms. The accounts from those who knew Edward Eddie Giron traced their concerns in the months leading up to the deadly altercation on May 10th and contradict a statement from San Luis Obispo County Sheriff Ian Parkinson, who told reporters at a news conference that Giron had no local record of mental illness. Benedetti was shot and killed by Giron as he and 5 other officers served a search warrant on Giron's apartment. Related to it, officials say were several commercial burglaries. San Luis Obispo Police Detective Steve Orozco was injured in the shooting. Giron, who officials say was also shot during an exchange of gunfire, died from what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. His friend and family members told the Tribune that they tried in vain for nearly a year to get him mental health help, which he would refuse, by reporting his increasingly erratic behavior and asking the San Luis Obispo Police Department to check on his welfare. Records obtained by the Tribune and interviews with Giron's loved ones also reveal an arrest for trespassing in Santa Barbara in July and an October incident in Avila Beach, as well as a missing persons report filed with the San Luis Obispo Police Department in November. All should have raised red flags about Giron's mental health and increasing paranoia of law enforcement before armed officers arrived at his apartment looking for equipment stolen from the pad climbing gym in San Luis Obispo. Wow. Giron, 35, had lost his jobs at the gym and at Costco in June and July and grew increasingly isolated as the COVID-19 pandemic raged on, sources who knew him said. But every time they sought help from San Luis Obispo authorities, they said the reports went nowhere. Quote, "Nobody could do anything," said Shelby Urban, a former neighbor. "It worried me about what was going to happen." A spokesman for the sheriff's office, which has investigated the shooting, did not respond to a request for comment Wednesday. So did a San Luis Obispo public communications manager, Whitney Centesi. Responding generally, she wrote, "We understand the community members, if the media have questions about the tragedy, blah, blah, blah. When a man opened fire on officers serving a court-ordered search warrant, resulting in death of one officer, injury to another, and the death of the suspect, we are all struggling to understand why a tragedy like this would or could happen here. An external investigation is being conducted by the sheriff's office, and the city is also conducting its own internal review." Well, the sheriff already said there was nothing there. While you're going to get the kind of like weird reactionary right-wing nonsense from Karen Veely at Cal Coast, which I guess Dave Congleton, radio guy, thinks is the only place for hard-hitting investigation. When you have, the daily paper doing a better job, I think, than the rest of the papers in town, at least, in holding the police department accountable. Matt Fountain also did a ton of work on the SLOPD being dishonest about Black Lives Matter activists. So this is why, I as a journalist try to impart on people this understanding that you can look at corporate news and understand that it's corporate owned. Tribune, I can't remember who they're owned by, Pulitzer McClatchy. And, it's suffered from many of the problems that have come with the conglomeration of media, right? Less editors, just less staff in general. But, you should be appraising every, not just every newspaper, but every reporter, every story, really. You have to exercise critical thinking, right? And Matt Fountain is a good reporter. He's a solid reporter. If you find a reporter who consistently does good work, holds powerful people and institutions accountable, well, you can build a level of trust. But even then, you're still going to appraise every article. Matt Fountain, I think that's a great report. There's more to it. I'm not going to read the whole guy's thing. I'd like to, but it's not the most interesting, YouTube stuff. Just reading the whole time. But you could see here the kind of disparity. As an independent journalist myself, and I make no question, I'm on the left, and I'm a leftist and a progressive. Like, I don't at all. just because a media outlet is independent doesn't make it good, and Karen Veely, the libeler over at Cal Coast News, is a clear example of that. And I think she hired a guy who was doing reporting during the Black Lives Matter rallies, and this kid literally submitted a video to please let me on InfoWars. So he's like an InfoWars stand wannabe. So that's the kind of quality you're getting over there. If that's what you're into, if you're into it, who am I to judge? You want garbage pumped into your brain? Go for it. I guess Jeremiah shared some information with me via email about that. You said it's kind of long-winded. Should I read it? Should I not? But thanks for being here, Jeremiah, and thank you for sending me that story. Ridiculous. I mean, just basically, Cal Coast News has done a lot of racist reporting, but just trying to, there was not a single live source in that story. I guess the Cal Poly spokesperson was one, but just trying to gin up anger at the ethnic studies professors at Cal Poly because they warned their students that that there were going to be a bunch of police on campus. Which might be upsetting to students of color, but they're acting like this is some crazy thing to do, crazy thing to do. I mean, it's ridiculous. Jeremiah says in this email, he says, I will say that it is my personal belief that Karen Veely is using both Dr. Janelle Navarro and Dr. Jose Navarro as targets for herself and Cal Coast News audience. An early example of this is from June 2020 when Karen wrote about the protests happening in SLO and quoted a tweet from Jose Navarro. The tweet was originally embedded but later quoted after the Twitter account was made private. I know from firsthand experience that both of the Navarros provide extensive and exhaustive amounts of time and energy volunteering in leadership roles, support their students, and guiding any individual who comes to them with sincerity. Although this is not very surprising considering the poor shot will likely pick a target, an easy target. Let's see. Yeah, and Jeremiah says we should put the spotlight on Cal Coast News, particularly on their lazy and often blatantly biased reporting. A special shout out to Karen Veely for being the ringleader of the poor excuse of a media outlet. I generally put every effort into not making even the slightest of insults, but if it looks, walks, and quacks like a duck, well, you get it. Let's see. Then again, they are doing what any media outlet or business does, working to please their customers and consumers. Yeah, man, I totally hear you on that, and agree. But like I said, you also got to know Karen Veely is libelous. Like she's a liar, and I fully expect her to start targeting me if she ever sees this or becomes aware of what I'm doing and what I've said about her, because that's what she does. She gets personal. She attacks people personally. She did it to colleagues of mine. Called people who just wanted her to adhere to basic journalistic standards, called them, sexist and all these things against her. And just, she's not a good person. She's not a good person, not a good journalist. So I don't mind saying it. It's my opinion. Yeah, so now be on alert. I'm now on the Cal Coast. Drew Rice says, sounds like a real Karen. Yeah, she's a literal Karen, literal and figurative Karen Veely at Cal Coast. But this is just some of the local dynamics here on the Central Coast, San Luis Obispo County specific.